Welcome all. Nagrik is a small think tank based out of Tehran. We aim to bring voices and stories from smaller cities and bring them to the mainstream. We also focus on creating more pathways through which citizens can be more influential in policy. We do this through our initiative called Nagrik. This year in May, we released the first two parts of this Nagrikal series during the panel discussion, Heat on the Horizon, Rising Temperatures in India's Smaller Cities. This Nagrikal series examines the relationship between climate change and cities, especially small and mid-sized. So today we are here to talk about another concerning impact of climate change, the rise in sea levels, especially in the context of smaller coastal cities. For this purpose, we've organized a panel discussion on the theme Turbulent Waters, Challenges of Sea Level Rise and Solutions for Coastal Cities. This discussion will be followed by the launch of our comprehensive report titled Rise in Sea Level, Fate of Small and Mid-sized Coastal Cities. Now, I would take this opportunity to welcome and introduce our esteemed panelists. First, I'd like to introduce architect Turbulent Waters. De Silva is the founder and principal architect at Architecture Team Goa, focusing on sustainable and vernacular building systems. Besides an architect, she is also a passionate environmentalist, educator, TEDx speaker, and writer. Her work emphasizes the impact of modern architecture and ecology, and she actively engages with communities and youth in alternative learning. Recently, she was recognized among 80 distinguished women architects at the India Art Architecture and Design Biennial 2023 at Red Fort, Delhi. Talula's work reflects her deep connection to Goa and sustainability and social architecture. With Goa as one of the states affected by sea level rise, we reached out to Turbulent De Silva to contribute as a panelist in discussing some of the learnings from the state's coastal habitats and communities. Our second panelist is Deepa Anand Padmanabhan, a social entrepreneur. Deepa, based in Thiruvananthapuram, is the co-founder of Sistera Foundation and Bhava India. Sistera Foundation is dedicated to climate action for a resilient world, while Bhava India is a social enterprise providing eco-friendly and sustainability services. Deepa holds a postgraduate diploma in environmental and sustainable development. Her work has been widely recognized, earning her the Woman of the Year Award for Social Causes from NASCOM. A passionate advocate for sustainability, Deepa frequently shares her insights through podcasts and guest lectures. She is deeply involved in driving sustainability initiatives at the grassroots level, particularly in Kerala. Most recently, she was a speaker at the Climate Career Conclave in Kochi in June 2020. Given her significant role in community engagement in Kerala and beyond, we thought it would be insightful to hear about her organization's journey in building solutions for climate change. We express our deepest gratitude to both our panelists for joining us today. We will be starting off with a brief presentation that summarizes the findings of an Nagrikal report, after which our co-founder, Tarun Sharma, will be moderating today's panel discussion. Thank you. Earth's climate has always been subject to change naturally in the past. But there is questionable evidence that climate change in the modern global scenario has been driven by human-induced global warming. Climate change has now become more widespread, rapid, and intense. It has several adverse impacts that are manifesting in cities across the world. This year, in May, we released the first two parts of this Nagrikal series during the panel discussion, Heat on the Horizon, Rising Temperature in India's Smaller Cities, where we discussed the role of urban planning, technologies, and community engagement in mitigating urban heat impacts. In this crucial time of monsoon, amidst the pouring rains, we open the floor by discussing a crucial impact of climate change, the rise in sea levels. Recent news cycles have brought attention to how more than 10% of Mumbai's land area is at risk of inundation by 2040. Much of the discussion on climate change-induced sea level rise focuses disproportionately on such larger coastal cities, even when smaller cities are at high risk of inundation. These smaller cities are often overlooked in the broader discourse on climate change, policy, and action, and suffer from a limited amount of research and knowledge production, along with gaps in climate data monitoring and availability. With this series, we intend to shift the focus on the challenges faced by small and mid-sized cities. Secondly, we aim to enhance citizens' understanding regarding the role that such cities play in climate change, and finally, to identify the knowledge gaps to enhance city-specific responses. This series is divided into 4 parts. As mentioned before, the first 2 parts were released in May this year. Part 1 contextualizes the relationship between cities and climate change, while the other parts dive deep into some of the major parts of climate change and spotlights the smaller cities that are undergoing such challenges. While part 1 had been introduced in the prior web launch, it is important to briefly go through it as it serves as an explainer for the consequent sections. It focuses on the type of climate change impacts smaller cities face, as well as the dual role cities play in this scenario. Our identity system, almost 90% of the GHG emissions and hence act as contributors of climate change. As sufferers, cities face varied impacts that put the residents at risk. According to reports, 80% of 998 cities globally are experiencing at least one of the climate disasters. Going by scientific projections, global sea levels are also expected to rise to 1.1 meter by the end of this century, and around 630 million people will most likely live on land below projected annual flood levels. Moving on to Indian cities, our country is home to 43 of the 100 most climate crisis vulnerable cities in the world. Moreover, 13 out of the top 20 risk locations in the world also include small and mid-sized Indian cities. Similarly, when it comes to the role of Indian cities in climate change as contributors, they emit 44% of the country's total carbon emission. Meanwhile, over 75% of the country's districts are likely to be hotspots for extreme weather events, making cities major sufferers during heat waves and cyclones. This indicates the increasing vulnerability of Indian cities in the face of climate change. As now we have set the context, we will be moving ahead with discussing the newer part of this series. Part 3 focuses on another one of major climate change impacts, the fate of India's coastal cities today with the rise in sea level. This report looks at the state of India's smaller and mid-sized coastal cities with respect to accelerating rise in sea levels globally, and how it puts these cities at risk of erosion, flooding, groundwater contamination, and intensifying extreme weather events. It further highlights the complex process of collecting and maintaining sea level rise data that leads to major data gaps for smaller coastal cities, and throws a light on the need for regional and local coastal regulation. This part also includes a case study on Bhavnagar to understand the impact of sea level rise on smaller cities and how there is an urgent need to address the lacuna of information available for such cities to address the associated challenges. Studies that global sea levels have been rising at an unprecedented rate due to human-induced global warming. The rate of global sea level rise has shown a faster upward trend since the 1900s. It has already set a new record in December 2023 with 104 millimeters above the 1993 level. The accelerating expansion, the global temperatures cause seawater to expand, and the melting of ice sheets and glaciers, which adds water to the ocean. Until 2003, the factors contributed equally to sea level rise, but recently melting ice has become the dominant factor. As per NASA's sea level projection tool, which uses sea level projection data from the IPCC's 6th assessment report, India has 12 coastal cities that are vulnerable to sea level rise. In our findings, 9 of these are small and mid-sized cities, which include Kandla, Bhavnagar, Murmugao, Kochi. With the current rate of increase, these cities are vulnerable to sea level rise of 1.77 feet to 2.7 feet by the end of the century. Climate Central reports that by 2050, 113 cities across 9 states face the risk of submersion due to sea level rise, with 109 of these cities being small to mid-sized coastal cities. Gujarat and Kerala are the most affected, with each with 21 cities at risk. A study by the University of Kerala found that Koilur experiences the highest erosion rate at 35 feet per year. From 2006 to 2020, Thiruvananthapuram's coast lost around 2.62 square kilometers of land, and its beaches could disappear within 5 years if without intervention. Extreme weather events like cyclonic storms have become more intense due to rising sea surface temperatures and sea levels. In recent years, the time for low pressure systems to develop into cyclonic storms has shortened from 2 to 3 days to just 1 day. This was evident in Gujarat's case in Cyclone Biparjoy. Similarly, in May this year, Cyclone Remal intensely affected eastern India and Bangladesh's coastline as a result of climate change. Collecting and maintaining sea level rise data is a complex process compared to monitoring air quality and temperature data. In this case, continuous data availability for several decades is a necessity. Real-time data on sea level is currently available only for 29 small and mid-sized cities. This is concerning as our research reveals that 109 small and mid-sized cities are at risk of submerging. The only tide gauge that has been recording sea level data continuously for more than 100 years is located in Mumbai. India's policy on sea level rise primarily focuses on building flood and cyclone resistant infrastructure. However, coastal regulation norms are often tweaked as needed, compromising the effectiveness. The country lacks a regional assessment to identify high risk areas, making localized studies crucial. While global models like the IPCC provide useful predictions on sea level rise, regional and local studies are essential for tailored area specific responses. To understand the impact of rising sea levels on smaller coastal cities, we've looked at Bhavnagar as a case study. A small city in Gujarat's Saurashtra region, it is projected to experience a sea level rise of up to 2.7 feet by the end of this century. The rise is about 1.2 times higher than the global average projection. Despite this, Bhavnagar not only lacks adequate research, monitoring, and data availability, but also lacks an adequate tide gauge system. Our report highlights how none of the 30 research studies published between 2013 and 2022 focused on Bhavnagar. Even Gujarat's integrated coastal zone management focuses on Gulf of Kutch, leaving out the Gulf of Khambar, where Bhavnagar is situated. While we highlight these knowledge gaps, the areas of further inquiry include the role of communities, technology, and NGOs, which we believe may be instrumental for tackling climate change related issues for smaller coastal cities. Thank you. Now I request Tarun to address the panelists and take the discussion forward.
Thanks so much, Arundhati. As I hope that this was maybe some amount of the knowledge that we've included might be already known to some of you. But what we tried to do was bring out specifically the role of smaller cities in sharing the disproportionate risk of climate change and being impacted by sea level rise, and also some of the gaps that are there. And these gaps are not just in larger cities also, but some of the smaller cities definitely share these gaps a lot more. And going forward, the need would be a lot more as well. But one of the things that we saw was that over 113 small and mid-sized coastal cities are at risk due to rising sea levels. And given such a risk, the role that you both have been playing, and that the work lies at the intersection of urban infrastructure and driving community engagement. Could you maybe share a little bit about the work that you're doing on climate resilience in coastal cities? You are in Trivandrum, and Talula, you are in Ranji. And I saw Talula's one of the documentaries that you were part of earlier as well. Maybe if you both can one by one talk a little bit about, and maybe we are sitting in the hills and we've seen one kind of impact over the last 5 years in terms of climate change in these mountains. If you can help us understand the same in your respective environments. So over to you.
Yeah, Talula, you want to go first?
Sure. So my work actually specifically with Panjim as a coastal city started in about 2008 when we were working as local consultants to under the JNNURM mission. And for me, actually, that was the first instant to learn more about the city from the perspective of, the sea, the rivers, and what, kind of ecosystems and traditional systems that are there. And many of them play a much bigger role than we understand. And subsequent to that, I've also had an opportunity to work with other organizations like ICLEI, and where as stakeholders, our inputs have been taken in various workshops. Some things I've written has been referenced to. And the last bit was a couple of years ago when the draft zonal management, coastal management plan was being prepared. And many of us actively participated because we found that, the mangroves were not listed properly. Some of the water bodies, creeks, estuary and water bodies were not listed properly. And we gave a lot of inputs in the form of presentation, maps, as a collaborative work to the government so that these could be taken into account and one could take cognizance of these. I also do a lot of work from the perspective of outreach. So I work with a lot of college students, conduct design thinking workshops for architecture students. Most of my lectures are outdoors. So we go into the riverine areas, we go into the coastal beaches and understand the vegetation, the assets in terms of biodiversity that it holds, and also make people aware about Goa has unique flood management systems called khazans, and I'll talk more about it maybe in the subsequent questions. So creating awareness that these, like forest is infrastructure. The ecosystems around our coast is infrastructure. It's not the bridges, highways, which is infrastructure. So teaching and creating awareness with youngsters and students about this and professionals about this. And then as a writer, I also write about issues that Panjim city is facing from the perspective of climate change, deforestation, desertification of Goa, which is impacting us hugely. And I've seen the city change. I was born and brought up in the city. I walked the streets of the city. And from when I was a little kid to now, we never had flooding in the city. And today we are noticing, and though, the fact that Panjim is a coastal city has not changed. But it's in the guise of development, what's been done to the city is terrible. And now we are facing flooding, a lot of other issues.
Thanks so much, Talula. Deepa, you want to go?
So hello all. So I'm part of the organization called Sustera Foundation, which we work in the domain of climate change and sustainability. And we have a pan-India vision. So though we are rooted in Trivandrum, we have a unique program, which is called the Climate Leadership Program. And we have 3 states present right now, Kerala, Tamil Nadu, and Uttarakhand. So we have climate leaders in all these 3 states, and we just launched our is called the Climate Leaders Action Network last month. So when we say climate, it's a huge umbrella, as you all would know. And you just can't say, you handle this area of climate issues, you handle this area of climate issues. No, it's all interconnected, be it the knowledge about it, be it the experiences. You can't keep them in boxes. So when we say coastal, issues, it will start from the highlands. When the riverine systems start from a mountain somewhere, it is going to connect to the coastal economy issues. And just like that, I mean, the UNEP report says that nearly 37% of the global population live within coastal lines, near to the coastal lines. That is 100 kilometers of the coastal lines. And Kerala, the width itself is 120 kilometers at the maximum point. So then you can just think that how, a large percentage is of our coastal presence. So most of the 14 districts, 9 of ours are coastal districts. And some are unique because they start from the coast and end in the mountains also. So the fragility is compounded all the more. We have sea intrusion on one side, and we have, just like you would have heard, Wayanad landslides on the other side. So this is quite scary at this point. And coming back to the crucial point of addressing the issues that smaller cities face. Yes, just like you speak about global north, global south, we also have the issue of, within India having, which cities are more prominent in the dialogues and which cities are not. Let it be political, let it be otherwise. Why are you not in the dialogues? That is another area which we always are concerned about. So when we say climate action, we have this climate leadership program, and through them, we get to meet a lot of community members. And that is how our community programs start. So while working in the Trivandrum Municipal Corporation, engaging young leaders, we had some calls from the coastal community about addressing their issues. We went with a lens of climate addressals, and we came out talking about social justice issues. And for them, climate impact was not as so big as waste management challenges. And so then we understood that we'll need to look into this more, from a micro level, and that's how our coastal intervention started. We call it the Project Susthiram. Whatever interventions we do in the coastal lines, it comes under the Project Susthiram. So we are doing a lot of waste management addressals, awareness campaigns, trying to study how strongly and effectively would the larger urban population be involved in these addressals. And we also believe in the strength of youth collectives addressing problems in a bottom-up way, and that's why we had the Coastal Champions Fellowship Program, which is an offshoot of the Climate Leadership Program, which is for the coastal youth, by the coastal youth, of the coastal youth, in that manner. And the only criteria was they should be from the community or be living 5 kilometers from the coast. That is another program which we did. And late in the beginning of this year, we had a women leadership program in a very small hamlet, which is between backwaters and the sea in the southern part of Trivandrum. So that is where now we are also engaging in the collectivization of women who want to lead community resilience in their smaller hamlets. So these are the 3 addresses which we have started now, and I'll speak more about them. Yeah.
Great. Thanks so much, both of you. I think one of the key themes that made us reach out to you, because when we were looking at this, one of the threads that runs through a lot of our research is figuring out ways in which citizens and communities become part of knowledge creation as well as leading conversation and action. And both of you, in your own capacity through Sustera and through Architecture T, and of course also working with the agencies that are in the respective cities, whether it is the municipal corporation or other planning organizations, have started different initiatives to bring these communities into discussion and also leading some of these actions. So maybe if you could share some of these insights in terms of your key observations of the work anchored in citizen participation in their role. What are the, like, for example, I think there are mangrove restoration projects that I think you've done in Trivandrum. Then you talked about the leadership program as well. So both of you can separately talk a little bit about what kind of insights you are getting while you are engaging with these communities, and who are the kind of people who come and join, what are some of the incentives, what are some of the learnings that they get, and how do they go and feedback into the community, because that would be very useful to understand for other places as well.
Yeah. So shall I go first?
Yes.
Yeah. So yes, the invested community, the community where we are intervening, they have to be the primary participants, narrative drivers in any sort of localized ecosystem-based plans that we are engaging in or piloting or trying to sustain. Often, in the last 2 years, wherever we engage, especially in the women leadership program, what we saw that a lot of CSOs or NGOs have started projects on a contractual basis, and it kind of the resources are there, but the project is over. There's no monitoring, as like you were mentioning earlier. How do you sustain efforts and then have an exit plan where a third person have be the owner or the the speaker for them, but they have to find a way to sustain their resilience movement. So that is how the whole idea of having the citizens, the community participate in our interactions, that came up naturally. It's not new. Everyone talks about that, but how many walk the talk consistently is the challenge. One of the biggest challenges we faced is we saw a lot of projects after the deadline and there's no vested interest. Of course, funding is one issue. You take up such interventions, and who owns the resources to continue such efforts? And that is where the whole point of what can you transfer to the community from your strengths. So we are looking at engaging the community, and we focus on youth and women more. And and our inherent strength is capacity building and opening our networks to them. So through our programs, through our leaders, we engage with the micro community that we are working in, and we try to deliver or engage them in the tools that are openly available to them already, but might not be known by them. So, for example, in the Women Leadership Program, we introduced them to how take primary data surveys, how to understand the stakeholders in your micro system, how to put up a proposal if you want to talk to the panchayat members, on how clearly you can note what you want using digital tools. Such things they had an idea how to, but streamlining it using available tools and techniques is something which they would have benefited. I mean, they would benefit from is one learning that we found. And second is how engaged can they be in sustaining such community-owned resilience movement, and that is where opening up networks. We are any external agency. We are not the primary stakeholders there. That is the first thing we all need to mean, and most of us know that. But the thing is, how many of us actually follow that when we are in a project is a bigger challenge. We unknowingly end up, thinking we are driving a project, we are doing something for them. Kind of that attitude, seeps in somehow. But remembering at all points that the primary investors, the owners, are the community, and we are just the enablers. We are just the facilitators. So, are we looking at the challenges, the narratives, the possible practical solutions from their eyes, from their knowledge, from their perspective, in short? So having a whole lot of initial engagement with them to understand their challenges, to listen to them, just beyond that questionnaire tools. You need to be one of them for a long, long time is what we understood. That's why we are sticking to spaces in Trivandrum right now, investing, where we have our own resources, where we can spend more time. So be with them, understand, and often we see that a whole lot of people have already engaged with them from the science data-driven side, from the social impact side, but nothing is being held through. So they have lost a lot of trust in other people now. In the small two villages where we are right now engaging, the first question is they're asking is, okay, it's just another report for you. How long will you be there? That was the first question we also heard from them. So engaging with them, gaining that trust, and having a very clear exit plan for ourselves, which means keen ownership, sustainable ownership by them. And for that, we need to have very practical, minimal simplistic solutions set first. That is one thing which we are learning on the go. And coming back to the coastal community leadership in Coastal Champions Leadership Fellowship Program, that came out of our understanding that we need to have youth engaging in all these dialogues. A key point that we all seem to overlook is the intergenerational aspect of issues. So when we say the indigenous knowledge, when we say the local perspectives, there is an intergenerational quality to that also in the local ecosystem. In most of these hamlets, we see a clear first generation shift in livelihood away from fishing. They are aspirational, and the climate change issues adding to the whole, the challenge of depleting fish wealth, the increase in tropical hurricane patterns, sea intrusion, land loss. So they are aspirational, and they're thinking, why would we want to go to this livelihood where there's a challenge is more? So we see a keen shift in that. But during the COVID, that in our dialogues, what we saw it in certain hamlets in central Kerala, people were coming back to fishing. So how can talk and engage in these kind of opposing what do you say narratives arising in a similar coastal belt in a small state of Kerala? So that is how this Coastal Championship Fellowship arose, where we selected 12 leaders from the community or living very near the coastal lines from the 9 districts, and we took them through a 3-month reflective journey, very interesting site visits, and they reflected and came up with top 12 issues, which through a youth perspective, having a very strong gender lens on, that they said should be taken up, and what could youth and communities do to work on it practically again. I mean, it's not like, governments should do this overnight. It was more practical. What can be done on the ground, essentially nudging shift towards positive practical changes. So maybe I can talk more on that later. So engaging community, especially youth and women, is something which we feel is very, very strong. Of course, in a very strong public-private partnership, the local governance, the other stakeholders like the religious institutions, faith influencing climate action in hyper-local ecosystem is something which we very strongly believe in, and that we have an example of it also, and also having driving interest and ownership among the larger urban population. In Kerala, actually, we don't have a rural or that kind of line across the coast. It's all majorly peri-urban. Very few villages are still in the old mode of construction and all. We see concrete all along the state line now.
Thanks. And I hope that we can come back to some of these things that you talked about, the top 12 issues. I would love to hear what are some of these things that have come out. But first, maybe Talula, if you can briefly talk about your insights, your learnings in terms of engaging with the communities. Yeah.
So I'll share first my observations or our observations of working in these areas. And Panjim over the years has been grappling with largely one is the coast and all of that, but largely it's flooding and it's impacting the erosion. It's also impacting the fishing community. Many of the fishermen say that, like 10, 20 years ago, the fish catch, if you went just a little out in the sea, was a and now, of course, that is connected to trawler fishing and all of that. But yeah, these erratic climatic changes and weather patterns is impacting them hugely. If you look at a large number of the government projects, especially the highways that have been built in the recent past, flyovers and all of that, have taken away a lot of areas which are wetlands, which are actually catchment areas in Goa, and help in percolation of excessive water. We have had loss of this. We've also lost a lot of mangrove cover across the coast because of these development projects. And again, it is always we are at loggerheads with the government, because the government, maybe even has the intention to do these things in terms of remediation, but nothing is happening. And but there are strict laws. Like if there is loss of mangroves for a development project, you are supposed to replace with regeneration of mangroves. The government has been supporting our voluntary work, because a lot of organizations have got together here. It was launched more than a year ago with the forest department to regenerate areas where mangroves have been lost. But largely the effort is from local citizens, youth, children. And we've done across the years lot of collection of mangroves happening and transplanting it in area community of the river, which have lost a little bit of their land where they used to keep their fishing boats. So these are serious issues, and these hamlets are very small. So I think for action from the government, they feel that this is too small an area to address the issues of. Cousins in Goa are a unique system which you will not find anywhere across in the world. And we have 11 rivers. All along these 11 rivers, where we have very unique estuarine ecosystems. There are these more than 3,000 years old flood management systems that were built. And what are these flood management? They have embankments which are built all along the riverine areas. They have sluice gates which manage the tides. There are little, they're called pui. The areas of water catchment are called pui. They're all shallow waters. And there are also areas where rice is grown. Kerala and Goa are the only two places that grow this indigenous species of rice that can withstand salinity. Now, if you look at Panjim Falls in the taluka of Tiswadi, and nearly 80% of this land is Khazan land. And we have this infrastructure, and more than the bridges and the highways, this is important infrastructure to safeguard, to conserve. And again, as various NGOs, we've been creating awareness, doing workshops with architecture students, engineering students, college students, to create awareness about these indigenous systems, to understand the role of, citizenry more than farmers and everything. Last year and the year before that, we had rains every month post monsoon. And why is this disruptive? It is an impact on the crop. So there's less production of the local red rice. Vegetable production is impacted, fruit production is impacted, and salt production is impacted. The Khazans at one point thrived. We had more than 300, 400 salt pans across the state. Today, there are barely about 20, 30 salt pans in the state. And when it rains, then you cannot harvest the salt. You have to begin the process of nearly 2 months to, again, manage these lands so that it can produce salt. So again, there is and these areas are actually impacted because they're under heavy pressure for development. Besides agrarian land, these lands are also under this pressure. And we have a lot of the peri-urban areas at the city edges, which are all Khazan lands. And, basically there are food security. And we've been working with the local communities, even doing farming, all across the last 3-4 years since the pandemic, growing rice, understanding how, the changing climate is impacting and what more we can do.
Thanks so much. That is very insightful. And I think we've been, as part of another program where we were in Udaipur recently, we were talking with a bunch of local organizations that are trying to make the citizens aware of the impact of climate change on their lakes. And so many of them have been living for so many generations. But one of the challenges that they have been facing over the last 20, 25 years is to continue this engagement of the local citizen keeping their lakes clean. And I had seen the documentary that in which you were also featuring Bag and Panji, and there is so much local indigenous knowledge about the local infrastructure, and as you said, not necessarily the physical infrastructure, concrete infrastructure, but the natural infrastructure, which has both in Vizag as well, which for decades was there and instrumental in regulating these floods and regulating the climate in these cities. But over time, the understanding, the vocabulary around this has lost. And I think one of the things that I see you doing is building that vocabulary along with the community. But along with that, one of the things that we hope that we'd ask you is that you have a wider network, a wider understanding as well of these issues in other cities as well. And Deepa, you mentioned that you also have a pan-India vision. So I'm assuming that you also look at some of these challenges in larger cities. And one broader insight that we kind of highlighted was that even though smaller cities are at a larger risk, they still have lesser capacity, both financial, technical, in terms of dealing with this. So do you see some such challenges that smaller cities face peculiarly as compared to larger cities? Maybe you have some larger cities that you might have compared, or in terms of, say, what kind of data capabilities that cities have, or technical expertise that these cities might have. Any insights on this comparison, that how smaller city challenges might be either more unique or have larger opportunity in terms of tackling?
Yeah, so in Kerala, there's nothing like a large city, Ernakulam, Kochi being the largest city that you would get to see, but also the uniqueness of the problem here is that we have very much varying distinct coastal spaces. So that's why even in our program, in the Coastal Champions Fellowship program, we had divided the coastal districts into 3 zones: north, central, and southern. And even in the southern space, what we saw near about Trivandrum and when we go towards Kollam was absolutely different. And when we reached Alleppey, which is the northern part of the southern zone, it was totally different. Some commonality was there in the issues being spoken about, but otherwise, when it came to fish catch or when it came to the migration issues due to sea intrusion or anthropogenic problems, it was of majorly varying nature. For example, in North Kerala, there was a lot of encroachments into the coastal space by way of tourism resorts and stuff, and that was creating a lot of challenges. At the same time, so in the program, we were looking through the lenses of health, infrastructure, land acquisition. That was the major areas we were looking at. So we saw a very distinct difference in the zonal areas. And one more was we were looking also at the migration patterns. So in the North Kerala space, what we saw, there was the percentage of land acquisition was higher. And health was the point that the communities, when we visited, they were talking about is impact on them due to the ship breaking activities. That was one of the major health impacts seen there. And infrastructure, again, that connected to the land acquisition is more of tourism encroachment infrastructure. And when it is coming to what they wanted by way of sea walls or other breakwater stretches, harbors were what they wanted more. And there were one or two case studies of how harbors were helping them. But then this had to be connected to the larger coastline, where, for example, when the Vizhinjam came, people on the southern part of Vizhinjam are like, we have beaches now, but on the northern side, there is a swell now. So while we were visiting Porur, they were like, we are challenged. They are so sorry, they are to the north of Porur. So they were telling we have no space for roads now because the water is coming in. And the people to the south part of Vizhinjam are okay because they got 2 beaches. So this is one, in this journey, we saw a certain, there is no baseline study that I can quote here, but this is what we heard from our field visits. And for example, migration, North Kerala, it was more due to both environmental as well as economic stresses. Like intrusion was high from the seaside. At the same time, tourism or anthropogenic encroachment from the land side was there. So the people in the coastlines had to migrate due to that, as well as general economic stresses. In the middle zone, protests were on, again related to like the northern trawlers were coming into the middle waters. This was one interesting dialogue that we listened to. Again, since we couldn't do a pilot data collection, we could not refer to it anywhere. But this is the outcome of a unique program that we did. And hopefully we'll have a detailed baseline study soon. That is what we are looking into, one area of how we could maybe engage further. And in the middle zone in Malappuram, especially kidney failure was touted. So we spoke to more than 50 fisher folk there, and most of them we came out with the kidney failure numbers. But again, we'll have to go into an analysis data collection to understand. So that's why we couldn't release a detailed report. We just mentioned this as what came out of our discussions with the community. And sea erosion is a major issue in Middle Kerala, though not as strong as Trivandrum and Kollam right now, but still that is what we got in our field study there. And they were requesting for more sea walls there. And yes, depleting fish wealth leading to migration is a feature in Middle Kerala also. Coming to South, which is more on the news because of the Vizhinjam strike, which you would have all heard, the bigger transshipment port on the lines, which is going ahead very strongly. But unfortunately, there's a lot of socio-economic environmental disruption happening there. And that was one thing which came about during our field visits. And also in the Vettigard space, you have the titanium company, where there's a lot of pollution happening. But again, there is an opposing point there, because since it's giving a lot of employment, people would not take it up as an issue. So this is something we saw. there is an opposing, challenge there where whether to go against it or not is what the community itself, they were divided in some way, didn't want to talk about it because they were employed in the industry. And the others who were living quite nearby and didn't have a job in it, maybe were voicing out very strongly. And then also in nearby Alapi, we had that black sand mining issue where we met a group of fishermen and community supporters who were on a strike for more than a year. But apparently nobody is ready to hear them because there is a bigger business interest there. So typically the small city issue there, but within that, the the very clear divide between who are the stronger, who holds a stronger voice and power, and whether an issue can be addressed practically or not. So this is something which we saw through the field visits, and hopefully, again, as I said, the challenge is being funding and support. To engage in the detailed study of such micro level problems, we'll need a lot of driven interest. And that is one of the biggest challenges, to get data to corroborate that climate is impacting and exacerbating such issues, along with anthropogenic problems. So that is one area which I wanted to speak about, how that you can see myriad issues across the coast. And under this, something again, if you look at it from another perspective of whether an issue is socioeconomic or cultural or environment related, again, there's a whole lot of overlapping and cross-sectionality. So so you would know that. So when we were speaking to some people in Purur, for example, during the Women Leadership Program, they were talking about how the men were more bothered about the landing center being down due to the after the Oki issues, and then they want a new landing center.
Okay.
But women, so the women were bothered about we are not having enough fish to vend, and there's a whole lot of external interest where there are private vendors coming over, and so they are losing their livelihood of vending.
Okay.
And then the youth had another interesting perspective culturally, where they were losing their football grounds. So we could connect this because mothers were telling boys were getting quite a significant percentage were going into substance abuse and being school dropouts. I'm talking about a small village. And when we spoke to some youth from that community later, they were telling a positive engagement for us would be sports and arts. But where are the spaces for that? So again, we need more studies in this front. We need to engage more policy and governance, more science and academia. There are more social impact organizations coming in a collaborative effort, because not one report can help solve all the issues.
Very true. I think the one of the highlights that we have in our Nagrikal, I think, which Arunti also pointed out in the presentation, is this absolute lack of studies in smaller cities. And just in one state of Kerala, you highlighted the amount of diversity in these issues that requires so much context-specific knowledge, baseline data banks, which can allow to make unique, specific policies and not one size fits for all kind of a framework approach.
Because,
so, but I'll.
Just to finish it, let's just add one more. Interesting thing is, in southern Kerala, people were talking about depleting fish well, but in middle Kerala, the fishermen we spoke to, they were said it's like you tell chagara in Malayalam. It means I don't know the other corresponding Hindi word for it. It means a bountiful catch. So within kilometers, we heard such narratives. So we strictly need a lot of in-depth micro level studies, collaborative.
So, Talula, if you can maybe also share some of these insights from your work in Panji. Yes.
So, Goa is, of course, very unique with entire eastern section, which has the Western Ghats, where our rivers originate from and everything. And then we have the plains, plateaus, and then, of course, the coast. While Panjim is a small city, it has been attracting a lot of development projects. We have had the highway project, cutting across Goa because other cities in India needed to be connected and people need to travel within the shortest distance. We've also had some controversial projects, which were one is the road widening project, the railway line doubling project for the coal transportation. This is all along the coast, and of course, one more which was for the electrical substation. And these were taking away a lot of pristine forest land, land of people along the coast, and causing quite a lot of problems. I also want to talk about, how large part of the citizenry in the recent months has been, fighting for their rights and raising a voice against massive conversion of land. Now, what is happening is because larger cities like Delhi and others have been facing extreme heat, right? So there is a migration, and it is also, of course, propelled because of COVID and how people wanted to get away from polluted cities. And so we have a lot of migration, both at the higher level and at the bottom level, where people are coming, of course, for jobs and then for a better life. So, and for better air. Okay, so we have all citizens from the major cities in India coming to Goa. Now we need, and besides that, we also have 5 times the population of tourists coming to Goa. Does Goa as a small state, especially being a coastal city, have the capacity to take in tourists as well as, can we call them climate refugees, because people are getting displaced and finding, the senior citizens, children are finding it extremely difficult to live in these cities, right? Now, what is happening is the government is not taking cognizance of what it needs to do to safeguard the state and the city from climate change and the vagaries of climate change. But it is making this accommodation for people from other cities. And it is done in a way by doing mass land conversions, passing bills in the assembly to facilitate this. Now, what is happening is when a tourist comes to Goa, the tourist comes from the perspective of enjoying, going to a hotel, going to the swimming pool, or going to the beach and having a good time. The same tourist, after some years, because his or her city is unlivable, is migrating to Goa and wanting to build a house like a tourist. So we have, currently there are thousands of villas being built, each with a swimming pool. We also have our natural water bodies. Can Goa and Panjim, as a small city, take this massive land use change, right? And it has an impact. The recent report says that Goa is already 52% desertified in comparison to Rajasthan and Gujarat, which is, I think, 72. How is this desertification in a land where we have massive amount of rainfall? So it is happening because of deforestation. And therefore, by 2030, we are not supposed to have any more groundwater, right? And this is again all interconnected to what is happening to climate at large. So there's a lot of work to be done, and I think with schools and with children and with local NGOs, the awareness is there. But I think there needs to be a lot of education of our members of parliament and our representatives, our local representatives, that needs to be done, because they still don't understand this ticking bomb. That climate change is very real. While we are experiencing landslides and flooding massively in Goa, many villages have been cut off from this. And we are also, people are reporting of cutting off hills in areas which are away from the coast. Why is this? What is happening in our hinterlands will impact the coast. We are facing the sea, and then we are also facing the impacts of what is happening in the higher regions. So it is depressing at one level to think about it, but we are doing a bit to create awareness about this, integrating this kind of thinking and awareness into education, whether it is in schools, colleges. And we take children out to these locations to help them understand. One of the exercises that we did with a business school on environment studies was to report and document the evidences of climate change. And many of them came back with many things, erosion, massive erosion. We have shacks on the beach. At one time, let's say there were 100 shacks. Today, there are more than 500 shacks on the beach. These have cut the sand dunes. Sand dunes are our first line of defense, like the mangroves. So sand dunes have been cut, flattened, and shacks have become more permanent. The policy has been changed. What was earlier allowed in bamboo and coconut is now becoming steel. And yet we can see, what is happening during the monsoons with these structures.
Thanks. I think we had hoped to do a small 1 hour kind of a panel discussion, though there are still few questions that I'm left with. So unless the panelists don't have a major issue, maybe I can just go ahead and ask one or two last questions, and then we can have a small 5 to 10 minute open-ended session where if the audience has any questions they can ask, and then we launch the report. So one thing that I just wanted to Talula and Deepa, I think Deepa, you have to leave in 20 minutes, right? Are you here?
Yes, I can be here till 4:50, no issues. Yeah.
Sure. Okay. So one of the things that I wanted to ask was that you already kind of referred to some of this, but for organizations similar to yours, and you both underline the importance of creating this baseline knowledge that we also have seen that does not exist. Then, since we're also talking about the intersection of citizens in enabling some of this knowledge. So from your experiences, what are some of these areas which present us opportunity in smaller towns to, by engaging citizens, by involving communities, to kind of create this kind of a knowledge? What are, like, for example, whether it is mapping or creating vulnerability maps, like there are now tools that are available by which you can do such things. So from both your experiences, given that you've been engaging with these communities across the various smaller cities and also villages, if you could briefly talk about these, because it can also give pointers to maybe other organizations that are in other coastal cities who could benefit from this. If there are tools, if there are software that you use, otherwise also more hands-on kind of approaches. So that would be very helpful.
Hands-on tools, science side, I think Talula would be able to speak more on that. So, but we believe in the strength of bottom-up capacity building and networking. Our programs, be it the climate leadership program or the coastal program or the women leadership program, it is more of, making them sit, ponder, peruse, and try to build a collective amongst themselves, which we, and then we add them to our clan with Climate Leaders Action Network, so that there's a lot of cross-learning and engagement happening. And for example, somebody like you sitting in Dehradun would understand how, a coastal village in Goa or Kerala works. And, some of and we are all talking about ecosystem-based adaptation, nature-based solutions. So you never know what sort of knowledge would. And so that lot of knowledge and skills is something we strongly believe in, and that is the whole point behind climate leadership, which we are looking at is in the local ecosystem. The people need to be exposed to the existing data, interventions, schemes, and for that they need to understand the stakeholders. And that is where the intergenerational challenge we have faced that. Like often, and that is majorly patriarchal also. So when we come to fishing villages, the men would be engaging more with the church or the fisheries department or the panchayat majorly. And unless there is a sudden situation like an Oki, that is where, once men are at sea and women are caught, unawares, that is how, for example, there is a group of youth in one of the hamlets in Trivandrum, which is called the Coastal Students Community Forum. Post Oki, they grew in strength because they understood the need to have this community owned resources. So now they have students who are engaging in proper science based higher education. They are setting up local weather stations, and the Cochin University is supporting them. And we are also trying to engage with them in understanding more. And you are having community network, radio networks popping up, which now the central government is going to fund. I believe they have offered 50 crores for community-based community network of radio networks. So these are things. So the community has to sit up and be aware of what is happening. And because of the intergenerational nature of these, challenges, it's important for youth to be given the needed skills and capacity and the network. And for want of a better word, I often see a lot of, that second citizen approach or a social exclusion when it comes to these communities. And let it be, all the communities who live off the elements, let it be the forest dwellers, let it be the farmers, let it be the hunters of the ocean, the fishers, you see this kind of social exclusion. And so unless they own the, walk and the talk, unless we open up them to, often like when we talk this baseline about baseline studies, we go for a survey. Where does this data end? Who needs to own the data? Who needs to be part of the policy dialogues? Who need to be part of the, indigenous knowledge and science-based implementations? So they are just the, they just fill the data survey tools is what I see. And that is why we come across these questions. Are you just coming to fill a report when we go? So, so we need leaders from that community, be majorly youth and hopefully women too, to be part of these tool creators. And then they have to be part of the bigger network. One of our, so for example, after the Coastal Champions Fellowship, we came out with the report, which I'll share with you. And I know you saw the report, I'm sure. So which was about talk from the youth perspective, what would be the top 12 issues that could be taken up. And one of the points that came up was a youth called Vishnu was telling, we would like to have PSC centers in each fishing village because we need to go to the city to attend a coaching class, and that is not easy for us financially and geographically. Last mile connectivity, so many things. It's very simple when they, and maybe for 4 or 5 hamlets, if you have a PSC coaching center, we could aspire to get into that space. So that was a simple thing, but maybe for us, it's like, something very usual. What is this? But that is also a kind of out of the box way of looking at things. And something else was community radio, which one of the leaders is pioneering in Alapi. He was talking about, regionalizing content and having a regular community radio for the people of the coastal villages. Not just, when a hockey or a taute hits, you need some disaster mainstream media reporting. No, you need a regular, because of the extremely vulnerable nature of climate impacts and anthropogenic issues, we need a regular news network for these spaces. And again, the opposing thing is these media news should not be only for them. It should be open up, and you should make sure that the youth and other larger community members listen to it. Because like Talula was saying, who is coming from Delhi to build villas in Goa? So they also need to be clued into what's happening. So that, having that ownership vested in the micro ecosystem, but building the responsibility in the larger ecosystem also towards this. That is that one very important area that, we should look into. I'll stop there.
Talula, over to you.
Yeah, I think there's a big gap between political leaders or our local representatives and the information of impacts of climate change. Because in the absence of that, you find them, passing bills, taking decisions which have huge repercussions on citizenry, right? I have found that we are using social media. A lot of youngsters are using social media. Whenever there is a calamity or something, warning, it is out, and everybody is made aware. I have so many students, both PhD and master students, who come for guidance and, to talk about, how much they've learned about, let's say, if they're mapping something. There's one student currently who's mapping springs and wells in the coastal region of Tiswadi, which is part of Panjim. And other students also were doing, there's a architect, environmentalist, she's an environment architect in Goa, who's done as part of her master's program, done the entire study of submergence of the Tiswadi Taluka. If there is rise in sea level. Now, this is vital data. After she finished this, and we are part of the Khazan Society for Goa. we had to make sure that this is taken to villages so that people are made aware about what will happen if we don't conserve our Kazan lands, and it will lead to submergence of the entire 80% of the taluka of Tiswadi. Now, this information should be given to the politicians. It should be
Yes.
given to my local representative, my local MLA, as well as the representatives in the government, even at the center, to be able to understand that, look, these studies, and there are tools, there's QGIS, which can give you contours. It can tell you about, there are so many maps available, to tell you about hydrology of a place, what will happen if there's rise in sea level, all of that. Now, having these tools and having these reports made should not remain in the coffers of the library. They should go out into the public. Why can't our students, why can't stakeholders, NGOs doing these reports, and maybe you can do it as part of
That's what
Nagrikal, you know.
that's what we've been trying to do.
Yeah, and maybe
Mm.
Deepa can do it. But these need to reach our, houses of power, where we can say that, are you aware of, and this is something that you can do as a leader, you take all the credit,
True.
but you can do so much more. And for us, it is like firefighting. We have a lot of youngsters. You'll be surprised, during the Save Moreline campaign, we had youngsters, largely artists, working across the world, creating these beautiful posters to disseminate information about fragmentation of forests and what it will do to the biodiversity. So, and we have another young, filmmaker. He's Kabir. He's a political science student, just returned from Delhi after his studies. He's doing these amazing carousels on cousins. What are cousins in 10 interesting posters? So I think
Nice.
youth are doing their bit. NGOs are doing their bit. Everybody is doing their bit. The missing gap is that this
Absolutely.
information going as a eye opener to the politicians, as a reality check. Because if they don't understand this, then we have given governance to in very dangerous hands.
Yeah, and that's why
Yes.
I think it's so important that
Yeah,
the
yeah.
work
We
that
are
both
actually
both of you are
adding,
doing. Yeah.
adding
Yeah,
to
please
that.
go ahead.
Adding to that, as Talula said, it's strong to have that, to try and nudge political will towards all these, engagements, because it's not an easy path. But of course, that is where we hope, when you engage with youth and create a network of them. Solo might be a challenge. Even maybe a group of 10 might be a challenge. When you have a presence of more than 3,000, 4,000 leaders across the nation, maybe that political nudge might happen when they are professionals who are also understanding climate and its impacts, and also having data from bottom up. So that is one vision that we are having, is data driven knowledge from each ecosystem, which corroborates through the network. And also you have some sort of political nudge tool, which is of
Sure.
course data driven again. So that is what, like Talula said, right now we engage with the KLRs, which is the Kerala Legislative Assembly Association, through UNICEF, in creating a tool for them to understand what youth would need to understand about climate. So that was an interesting engagement we were part of. But like she said, what happens to that data is not in our hands right now. So we are trying to connect to them, telling, can we have a paper, and we give certain pointers to the MLAs for what they can do in their own wards.
Sure.
So we are giving very simple points, like, plant and maintain few trees. Even in coastal lines, can you do a study of what, when it comes to mud flats or it comes to estuarine areas, it's not the same kind of green shield that you need. So can you do a study in your coastal ward? That is something which, it's not like a telling, do this. It's kind of a
Yes.
study only. So this is something which we want to push, with in coastal wards, talking to the MLAs of, can we start a knowledge drive there, which will be
Sure.
owned by the community people. Again, as I said, this all falls back on what support we will get for it. But yes, getting that political will, and also we engage in a strong way with the corporates. Those who are, we have only the majorly techie space in Kerala. So we work with them,
Yeah.
and right now, many of the younger CEOs are supporting us very well, which is very, positive for us. So that is, but of course it's early days, but we want to have this, partnership, and slowly, hopefully move ahead with that knowledge, skills, attitude, and finally, hopefully the practice turning around.
No, I think 10 years ago, if you had asked some of these, either the commissioners or people in the municipal governments, climate change as a concept did not really exist fully. But very recently, I was talking to two of the commissioners in Rajasthan, and I was generally asking about how do they perceive climate change in their own cities. And now, at least, the mindset has changed to the fact that they have a reference point that okay, the way it is in Europe, it is we are still a developing country. So even though they're trying to defend their stance that okay, we need to still work on the basics and we still need to work on creating an infrastructure, but at least that understanding that okay, it is there has already seeped in. So I think the larger journey is of this mindset that this knowledge needs to seep in into the minds. Once it gets seeped in the mind, then that's when the action can start. And that's why I think creating knowledge and creating more context specific knowledge that comes from these cities, that comes directly from the people who are experiencing it, not as you said, it's siloed approaches, but as something which is part of daily lived experience, is something that can help create this mindset change. So I think that journey is already happening, and kudos to both of you for leading in your own parts. And we are trying to play a small bit in also doing what you just said, that bridging this gap between this knowledge that comes from these smaller towns and making it usable both by communities as well as the policymakers. With that, I'd like to thank, like there were more questions, but I hope that we can continue to engage in future as well. But we have a few more minutes, and we have some of the audience still sticking around. And if any of you have any questions for both Deepa and Talula, maybe you can post them here. And then after that, we'll do a quick launch of the report.
Hi, this is Kedar Chaudhary from Odisha. Actually,
Welcome.
I don't have any question, but I have been doing this, working with the people through a local NGO. So what I have observed from the discussion today is that because they found that one missing link is that the approach of the civil society and the politicians, and whatever we are doing, they are not getting it properly, and how we should engage with them. So that is one area we are missing. With a long experience, I have experienced that is missing. Number two is the localization, because the local NGOs, small NGOs, they don't have the resources, but they have the mobilization capacity and they have the knowledge, local knowledge. Suppose because of their handicap with the resources, so that's why somewhere they have to larger NGOs or institutions have to make longer term partnership with this local NGO to make it effective. Third thing is that in most of the projects we don't provide we don't allocate much resources for the community mobilization and engaging with the community. But we are planning, we are very good at planning for the exit plans and sustainability, very goody things we talk. But how if the community is not engaged, if they don't own it, if the institutions, community institutions are not strengthened, who will take it forward? So that is happening mostly. Those are the missing links in the coastal community. I have worked in the coastal community, not in the marine lines, but maybe 20-30 kilometers towards from the coast. So that is the major aspects. And nowadays the people are also the local people are also the beneficiaries. Where we saying that that ma'am was saying that they are doing that digital library kind of thing, where people can come, the students can come, they have the access, digitally access to education and the technology and all that things. See, one example I can give, we have constructed during the floods and cyclones, we have constructed more than 25 community cyclone shelters. As an NGO, we got the funding, but the government, which the government made, government is owning it and government is maintaining it. But whichever we prepared. I tried my best for 5-10 years how to transfer the ownership either to the community or to the government, but nothing happened. Legally, nothing happened. Community is using it, but legally they don't have the ownership, so they are not ready. So that is happening. So if we prepare with the plan from the beginning that how this how this infrastructure will be used properly, so that is my experience. So I could not suppress myself to express my experience. Those are missing links. Still we have to put our effort towards that, and this partnership, local NGOs and bigger NGOs having resources, that has to be strengthened. So that will create more result, I think.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Kedaveshwarji. Anybody else?
This is such a topic we could keep on going on. Even now,
I
I'm
know.
like, okay, I missed a lot. So
No, hopefully we can.
can.
Yeah, even when you were talking, I have made like so many of these pointers that I want to maybe not in this call, but hopefully can touch base later.
Absolutely.
But if we don't have any more questions, then Arundhati, maybe we can formally launch the report.
Thank you, everybody. The report will be available on our website to download. So do keep a lookout on your email. We'll be also mailing you with the link to our report. And thank you so much for being a part of the panel today. Thank you.
And please go through the report and do critically go through it and give us feedback to improve, to enhance. And if there are ways in which you find it useful in your own work, we'll be happy to hear that as well, and how we can improve in furthering your own efforts. That is also a motivation for us. So thanks again, Talula. Thanks, Deepa. Best of luck for your own journeys, and do keep in touch. We will definitely do that too.
Yeah, so thank you for having me and Talula too here. It's been interesting because this is a relatively new area that even Sastera is engaging in. And so whatever, your report definitely will be of much interest to us. So looking forward to reading it and engaging with you more. And yeah, I would like to connect to Talula also. I'll be getting her details from you. Yes, Talula will connect soon.
Looking forward,
Perfect.
Deepa, and I welcome all of you to Goa. I'll be more than happy to take you to some of the most pristine landscapes, coastal landscapes here. Okay.
So the next, space where we need to have a clear leadership program.
Yes.
So definitely I'll be reaching out.
Let's do it. Yeah, let's do it.
Yes.
Perfect.
So thank you again.
Great.
Yeah.
Thanks so much. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.